Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. Before we get started with today's video, I wanted to show you a couple pictures about what's dropping on the Sleeve Chief website today at 20 p.m. Central European Time. So it's the branded collection and I wanted to show you a couple sleeves, a deck box, and also a 2-player cloth playmat. All of this is going to be available at 20 p.m. and I think the sleeves look amazing. The deck box actually has like a shiny front. The design is a little shiny and it's beautiful on the inside, and also the cloth playmat. It's always cool to have a cloth playmat, let alone a 2-player one, and I think all of it just looks so dope and I'm super hyped about this drop. So if you are as hyped as me, or if you want to get any other accessories on the Sleeve Chief website, please make sure to use my affiliate link in the description box below. You help the channel out, and you can also use code SHADOW at checkout for 5% off your entire order. Today we're going to be talking about how to stop and where to stop Superheavy Samurai. We're gonna go over a lot of hand traps, going second cards, and important points of interaction that you need to keep in mind to beat this deck. Because I feel like, and a lot of people of course have been talking about how it is probably going to be one of the dominating decks of the format. It is a bit weird, so to say, because it doesn't play spells and trap cards, so it's inherently a bit worse to go up against certain cards and they need to have some other outs, but we're also going to be discussing some cards that they can use to beat your hand traps and going second cards. So that's also important to keep in mind to really decide which cards you want to side in the upcoming format. There is, however, two things we need to discuss before we get started with everything, and it's really important. So the first one is the case of Gamma. They will usually play Gamma in their deck because it's insanely easy to be used in their turn as well, because they have a lot of effects activating while they still don't control any monsters, and it's also really good as a going second card. So because they play Gamma in a lot of scenarios, it's going to happen that you would much rather use a certain hand trap, and as an example I'll give Droll and Ogre on a card where they still don't control any monsters, so you are like hardcore playing into Gamma, but you kind of need to use those cards and put them in the situation where they need to have Gamma, as opposed to using these cards at other points in the combo, because the payoff of you using those cards is going to be much worse later on in the combo. Either they already have a Baron face up, or they have enough extenders to continue playing past your hand trap anyway, so now you're going -1 for literally no reason, but you're just playing around Gamma, which maybe they didn't have. So a lot of times you're gonna have to just, you know, cross your fingers and hope and just use an Ogre or a Joe. But we're gonna go through all of these specifics later, because right now, as the second thing I want to point out before we get started, is a lot of times you're gonna have to pair 2 hand traps together, and we did that a lot in certain formats where like hardcore combo decks were prevalent. So right now, if you have 2 hand traps, you don't need to worry about where do I use a certain one. You might just want to pair both of them together, because if you let them put up a Baron and then you have like an Impermanence paired up with the Nibiru, Veiler plus Nibiru, Gamma plus Nibiru, whatever it may be, you need to use it on one of their interactions, so they waste as much resources as possible while getting to that board, and then you can pair 2 things together. And you're gonna need to keep all of that in mind depending on what you side and what you open up with. So I already mentioned Droll and Ogre, and as the first one we are going to go a bit more in depth about Droll. So Droll is just really useful because all they do is search. But like I said before, a lot of times you're going to use an effect like Superheavy Samurai Bike, which they still don't control any monsters when they use it, so a Gamma on a Droll would hurt very much, but you kind of need to draw and just hope and pray for the best, because they search a ton, so Joe is just going to be insanely impactful. And also D-Shifter is another card that's just going to completely stop them, because they do a lot with their graveyard. They revive from the graveyard, they have Tunneler in the graveyard, which banishes itself to get a draw, which is part of almost every single combo, and overall the grave is useful to them, as well as face up extra deck, because when Wakaushi goes to face up extra deck, it can place itself in the pendulum zone, so immediately they lose another resource if it gets banished because Shifter is active. So a lot of times you're going to be able to stop them with both of these cards, but both play into Gamma, so keep that in mind. The next one is Ogre, which again would be best used on Wakaushi, but it plays into Gamma, so you can use it on other things. For example, the Scarecrow needs to summon in its own zone, so you can use Ogre on that. You can also use it if they start with Wagon, because Wagon needs to put itself to defense position in order for it to search, so you can Ogre that. You can also Ogre the second scale that they put up, the Benkei or something like that, the big warrior basically. You can use it on a ton of different things, but the best one is on Wakaushi, and you play into Gamma, so again, keep that in mind and just risk it. Because like overall, it's just nice to use these kinds of cards where you know they're also like paying some type of cost or removing themselves. For example, the next card we're gonna discuss is Ash, and it's probably best to use Ash on Soul Peacemaker because it's also going to tribute the monster it's equipped to, so immediately they lose another resource. But Ash overall is just not the greatest card against the deck. You can also use it on the Benkei search and just hope they don't have another extender. The next two cards are Valor and Impermanence, and they work kind of the same way because you're trying to use them when they waste as many resources as possible. So like on a Scarecrow, for example, you can use it where they actually pitch a card as well. And the next one is also Gamma, where it's even better to use it on Scarecrow or something like that because they also lose a body. Like in the case of Ogre, you want them to not have bodies on the board because a lot of times other Super Heavy Samurai cards need to equip two Super Heavy Samurai cards. So if you use Ogre or Gamma, you're also getting rid of the body itself. So these kinds of cards, like I said, I'm going to stress it again, just try to use them when they waste as many resources as possible, like pitching a card or having to special summon in its actual zone, so you know if you get rid of it, they don't get the summon, and just try to think of those things. The next one is also Nibiru, which again is going to sort of require you to use it in a specific situation where they don't put up Baron yet. So if you have Nibiru plus a hand trap, you can wait, you can show it's whatever. But if they get to the point where they have Axel Synchro Stardust Dragon and another card, so they're right about to go into Baron, you are forced to use Nibiru. And at that point, you also need to realize two things. And one of them is if they have a Stardust in their extra deck, they can actually summon it out, immediately Synchro Summon because of Axel Synchro's effect. And then the Baron they go into is going to be unaffected. So the Baron is going to survive your Nibiru. That's one. The other thing is that they can play post Nibiru, like almost no problem. They have extenders. They probably searched a Spy or something like that with one of the Soul Piercer searches. So they have an additional summon, and then they just can keep going and kind of end on almost a similar board, minus like one piece of disruption maybe. So it's not ideal, but you kind of have to use these cards in order for you to draw two of them and hopefully annihilate their entire board. Also, something to keep in mind is to always place the Nibiru token in the middle so they cannot summon Genius and plus off of it, because Genius gets the effect when monsters are summoned to both of the zones that it points to. So if you summon it in the middle, there is no way for them to make a zone open for the Genius effect. And the last one when it comes to hand traps is going to be DD Crow. Again, not a very impactful one, but if you're able to wait for them to Scarecrow, pitch a card and target a Soul Piercer, you can get rid of it so they don't continue looping it. And moving on to going second cards that deal with the entire board, like Dark Ruler, for example. Dark Ruler is really useful against them, but you need to keep in mind that they also play a Spell Cancer. They can cite it because it's searchable off of Genius, but dealing with the entire field with something like Dark Ruler is still really, really good. And also Sphere Mode is another one that's nice, but they usually put up 4 things, which is Appaloosa, Regulus, Baron, and also Savage. So you still need to deal with at least one, but still, you know, Sphere Mode is not a bad card. You need to play it in a deck where it doesn't bother you that you don't get your normal summon, so that's another thing. And also the next card I want to talk about is going to be Performable 5 Rainbow Magician. So this one has been talked about a bunch in recent weeks. A lot of people are buying it, hyping it, and it does seem really funny and really interesting against this deck, and also kind of useful. I'm not sure how many people are actually going to play like specifically 3 copies of this in order to counter Super Heavy Samurai. It really is going to depend on your personal meta, also on the ban list and how the format shapes up. In a deck like Branded, where they can actually send it to the graveyard, get it to a scale, it's much more useful because you still have enough space in your side deck because you probably only play 1 copy since it's quote-unquote searchable for you. So that's when it comes to the searchability and like the access to Performable 5 Rainbow Magician. But what it actually does is it literally locks the Super Heavy Samurai player out of the game because they will never have spells and trap cards face down in their spell and trap card zones, so their monsters are not going to be able to attack or activate effects. However, you have ways to play around it, of course. So they can tech the Eccentric, which is really nice because it's a monster, but it's spell trap removal, and there's many other ways to deal with it. People have been talking about Clockwork Knight because you can set it so you go around the restriction of the Rainbow Magician, but you can also remove it from the graveyard in order to get a search, and you still have no spells and trap cards in your grave, so it doesn't interfere with your deck. There's also the Magical Hound, which is also searchable by Ancient Gearbox. And another way of getting to the Magician, which I just remembered, is also Where Art Thou, which can be played in Pearly. So there's many ways of getting to it. Maybe people will play it, and there is outs to it, so I still wanted to mention it, and you can decide for yourself what you want to be doing. And as the last out, I wanted to mention something interesting, which is the Genius. So Genius is supposed to be unaffected, but the restriction on Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician basically makes it so the opponent's monsters cannot attack, they cannot activate their effects. However, when a monster is unaffected, and it can be Genius, it can be Ultimate Falcon, it can be pretty much anything that's unaffected, Final Sigma in the extra monster zone. When that kind of restriction is in play, basically the first part of the effect where it prevents monsters from attacking is not going to affect the unaffected monsters. The monster can still attack. However, the second part that prevents it from activating effects is still going to prevent it from activating effects. And we have precedents for that. There's the use of Forbidden Lance when Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician is on the field, and Forbidden Lance is going to make it so the monster is going to be able to attack, but it still won't be able to activate effects. Another precedent is VFD versus Ultimate Falcon, where still Falcon cannot activate effects and it can still attack. And that's pretty much similar to Genius, where Genius is going to be able to attack, but it won't be able to activate effects, so Genius is actually not an out to Performapal 5 Rainbow Magician. And then we also need to talk about some of the floodgates. So a lot of times floodgates are going to be able to be outed with the likes of Eccentric, not every single time, because one of them is also Anti-Spell. So I wanted to put it on here because they play Pendulum monsters. However, Anti-Spell can just be dealt with by them literally going into Zeus and wiping the field, because you're siding it going first, so they for sure get a battle phase and can deal with it. They can also make their Synchro, which pops a spell or trap card, and like I said, they have Eccentric and stuff like that. Also Genius, but all of these cards require some kind of setup. For the Synchro, of course, you need a tuner. Not only a tuner, it has to be a machine tuner. And for the other cards, you need to have bodies that you commit to them and go into all of these other cards to deal with their interruptions, while your opponent probably still has multiple other things to protect their floodgates. So floodgates are overall not bad against this deck at all, but there are ways of dealing with them, especially since they don't have like back row removal. You know for a fact what you want to prevent, which kind of summon, which kind of effect you want to deal with in order to keep your and preserve your floodgates. So you need to sort of calculate all of this out, but a couple of the floodgates that are really useful are there can only be one, for example, of course, because of their machine type. And in some situations, like I said before, there's Anti-Spell. Also, Gozen is not bad because their attributes in the extra deck are not Earth, not all of them at least, so you need to go into Baron and Axus Synchro, you need to go into some dark stuff, and it's not always going to be as easy. So that's it when it comes to the floodgates. So that's pretty much going to be it. Hopefully I covered everything, or as much as I could. And if there is anything else that I maybe missed, please make sure to share it with the others in the comments down below. I also would love to read all of you guys' responses. I think the deck is going to be really strong, but there are ways of dealing with it. So hopefully you got something from this video. And if you did, please make sure to like it and let me know down in the comments. Of course, sub, check out all the other social media, and also Sleep Chief, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.